Assalamualaikum, everyone. Welcome to Track D, Community Conversations, Room 175. So today we're going to have actually a documentary screening. So the presenters will come up, share a little bit about the documentary, and then, we'll have the screening and then I guess continue and facilitate a conversation. If you all have any questions throughout the screening, feel free to put your hand up and we can give you all little pieces of paper to write your questions down. Or if you'd like to save them for the end, you're more than welcome to do that as well. If at any point you feel like you need to take a break from the content or need to step outside, please feel free to take a break, do what you have to do to take care of yourself. And if you need any support or anything at all, feel free to see one of the organizers and we'll be able to connect you with one of the feel free to see one of the volunteers and we'll be able to connect you with one of the organizers, inshallah. Does that sound good? Awesome. So I'm so honored to introduce today's two presenters for the documentary. Ms. Saima Shaik, she is the Vice President of Project Taqwa and a licensed professional counselor practicing in Illinois. She specializes in mental health issues such as anxiety, depression, mood disorders, and relationship issues. And our second presenter is Ms. Manal Azam, who is the director of the documentary film With Hardship Comes Ease, which is the film that you all will get to watch today, and one of the event coordinators for Project Taqwa. She's currently studying psychology at Loyola University in Chicago. She is passionate about destigmatizing mental health conversations while advancing her clinical understanding of mental health. So without further ado, please welcome our two presenters, inshallah.
All right, Assalamu alaikum, everyone. My name is Saima. Thank you, Wafa, for the introduction. It's an honor to be here this weekend. The Project Taqwa is here for the first time, so it's truly an honor. I am here, like I said, on behalf of Project Taqwa. A little bit of an introduction on what we are all about. We are a Muslim mental health advocacy organization based in Chicago. We aim to, reduce the stigma towards mental health. We try to promote open dialogue by spreading awareness and providing accessible resources to community members in need. And as a part of our mission, one of the initiatives we have, our team has worked greatly on is directing and presenting today this documentary. This is going to be screened for the very first time before even showing it out to our community in Chicago. We are presenting it here. This documentary showcases the impact of mental health stigma towards communities, families, and communities and families. And you'll see why it's so important to break that stigma. As I am very well aware, each of you being here, I'm sure you know the importance of that, but I'm hoping we can, have a good conversation, share some insight, some wisdom about what you see in this documentary, and take it from there, inshallah. So, without, speaking for too long, I do want to get right into the purpose why we're here is to watch this documentary. So let's go on in. Before that, I do want to just go over a quick disclaimer, trigger warning. This documentary does contain some sensitive content regarding grief, death. So, like Wafa said, if anybody does need to step out for a second or for a couple minutes, please feel free to do so. And I would like to hold a space afterwards at the end for us to be able to process, what we watched and any thoughts, concerns, questions as well. So yeah, and with that, I present to you. Oh, absolutely. Yeah, we can turn this off. And with that, I present to you With Hardship Comes Ease.
It's complicated because we were praying for Arman to in the last few months where he was struggling, and as we always do, praying for all of our children to succeed in this life, in the next life, that they be granted with all the tools to achieve what they wanted to achieve and to become who they were destined to become. We as their parents are it's complicated because we were praying for Arman to in the last few months where he was struggling, and as we always do, praying for all of our children to succeed in this life, in the next life, that they be granted with all the tools to achieve what they wanted to achieve and to become who they were destined to become. We as their parents are privileged to be in a place where we can help them achieve that. And then, of course, along the way, pray that the trials and tribulations are some things that they can handle. We know as Muslims, we're told to expect trials and tribulations and challenges. We're also told that we will never be given a burden that we can't handle. That was Arman. He set his goals. He meant a lot to him to achieve those goals. That's how we knew that Arman was happy with what he just did. It was just a little smile on his face. Part of it could be because whether it was depression, we don't know, because at that time he wasn't, although he did go to a therapist, he wasn't evaluated as anything other than normal stress of a high achieving student. So looking back, we think there was an element of depression there, but he would just, we just felt that he wasn't feeling that joy. That piece was missing, and that worried us. And he confided in us that he was feeling anxious, but when we encouraged him to get himself evaluated formally so that we could have a baseline, we could understand, he just would not go to that step. He refused to go to that step for the reasons that we understood, that if the way things were, with the stigma that mental illness has, whether it's in our community, whether it's in the medical profession, whether it's just in mainstream society, there is a stigma. We knew that. We didn't want to gloss over what he was saying. He wasn't imagining the impact it would have on that, and he wasn't willing to pay that price. He wanted to somehow work through this on his own, and that worked against him. Things we saw right in front of our eyes, how his health was deteriorating. And yet he was getting the scores that he needed to. In fact, he was doing even better because he was just, it was like he knew his time was running out and he needed to accomplish what he set out to accomplish. So he would be studying 12, 14-hour days nonstop to get that score in his step 2 so that he could do those applications for radiology. He wanted to go into radiology for residency. And did not give himself a break, did not take a break.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. So we believe that our faith provides guidance and direction in all aspects, in our best of times and in our worst of times, in our most difficult moments and in times of ease. And no doubt those who are maybe struggling with mental health issues, that they can find guidance and they can find direction and support and hope in faith. So Allah reminds us in the Quran that struggle is an essential part of life. It's not meant, this world is not meant to just be, something easy that we breeze through. That's what paradise is for. And so this world is a world where there's going to be great times, there's going to be easy times, but there's also going to be struggles. And those struggles can manifest themselves in different ways.
So there should be no reason why mental health for Muslims should be any different than taking care of ourselves in the different ways, taking care of my diabetes, taking care of any other health issue.
See mental health just like physical health. So if you ask me the question, if someone's struggling with their physical health, should they get help? I'd be like, of course. But I guess the question and the thing that a lot of people struggle with is, at what point is intervention needed? So let's give the example of physical health. If you wake up one day and you have a headache, you don't think I need to go to the doctor. Same thing with mental health. If you wake up one day and you're feeling a little down, it doesn't mean you necessarily need to seek mental health support or services, but when it starts affecting your life, just like your physical health. So when you think about, you wake up and you have a headache, you take ibuprofen, Tylenol, and when it's not going away, and it starts affecting your life, you start sleeping more, you start not doing the things you normally used to do, it's affecting your physical health. So at some point you say, I need to go see a doctor.
People who are struggling need to speak up and get the help they need at the appropriate time in their lives before it gets severe to the point where things can be hard to manage and safety concerns may arise. The feelings of anxiety and depression arise from a variety of reasons, and a lot of those reasons are related to the stressful life we live in. We live in very tough times with the way our lives have been shaping in especially the last few years with the COVID, and how we've limited ourselves from social interactions. And yes, we are getting better and moving forward in that direction, but it has definitely created a lot of anxiety and depression. How we deal with this is very important as well, because stress is a known fact that we all go through in our lives, but how a person deals with this is very important, as people have different ways of coping. And it's important that we identify what works for us or get professional help. And there are programs that can help you develop these coping skills. You can learn them from a therapist or individual sessions. So approaching for therapy and learning these techniques to cope is very important.
If it starts affecting your life in that world of a teenager, that looks like their grades start going down, they're sleeping more, they start having more conflict in their relationships in their lives. And in the adult world, it's pretty similar. They start putting less effort at work, struggling with relationships in their lives. So these are ways that it surfaces when it comes to mental health. And when you start to see it affect your life in some negative way, then it's a good time for you to seek a professional assistance. Often, two of the most common words that come up in people's minds are depression and anxiety. And rightfully so, because they're extremely common. Any one of us, once you hit a certain age, has experienced both of them at some point in their life. One of the best ways is thinking of a physical analogy to that. One of the things I would say is that, like, by the time you're 35 years old, everybody's experienced indigestion of some kind. And sometimes long term, where they have regular discomfort and they may see a doctor at some point. When you're 18, you just deal with it and you move on. And then everybody's dealt with some kind of grief by the time they're 35 as well. The death of somebody close to them, an animal that was a part of their life. And so when it comes to anxiety, depression, it's the same thing. And we just got to see it as part of life, and not necessarily as something we're trying to avoid, but something we expect to happen at some point. And then the question is, how are we going to deal with it?
One of the things in our faith that's so beautiful is we see the human elements of the struggles of some of the greatest people. Who are our examples? Generally, it's the prophets, it's the righteous. And one of the things that's really beautiful is Allah shows us in the most clear ways how they struggled, and how their struggles are struggles that we can relate to and benefit from, and maybe even connect to them through these struggles and find comfort in knowing that we're not alone in many of the struggles that we face. In the life of our own Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he experienced an entire year, right? Think about it. He's a prophet for 23 years. One entire year of his seerah, of his life, was known as the year of sadness because of the tremendous loss that he faced in that year, which means he experienced sadness. So if the best of the creation of Allah, our example, can experience sadness, can experience those emotions at such a raw and real level, that it makes us realize that even the best can be vulnerable to life's challenges and the impact of those challenges on our life.
When it comes to Islam, I firmly believe that we have this rich history of spirituality that, and actually in all religions, there's this realm of spirituality as part of their religion that at some point gets ignored because maybe it goes too far in that direction. It's kind of like, the old phrase, throwing the baby out with the bathwater. A lot of the good things that came out of that help people get through their struggles in life, they don't have them again. So now we go back to, what are all the rules? You got to be this, and this. Okay, now you're a good Muslim. Okay, but I'm still struggling with life. Why is that? Well, we have these things that have always been part of our tradition. Read the Quran. And it's an example that's like a meditation where I'm forcing my mind to focus on something else temporarily. I feel good after doing it because I feel like I've done some ibadah or worship. And then other things are just, salah. Some people do dhikr. There are a lot of different things that people have done Islamically to help them through these challenges. Traditionally, some spiritual teachers would give a prescription of prayers to say.
And that's one of the great things about what Islam offers us, is that it allows us to use our intelligence, our abilities in ways that are not inhibiting. We don't have to choose between two things that are not mutually exclusive. So definitely prayer and relying on God, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, for help should be, in my opinion, in my experience, a integrated part of well-being.
Armand passed away on a Saturday, about 2:00. And by the evening, all the kids were home. We were sitting around, my parents were there. And I asked our boys, what did they want Armand's legacy to be? And Azam, the oldest, who is normally very reserved, he's the one who spoke up first. And he said, I want to remove the stigma of mental illness from our community. He said, if there wasn't any stigma, maybe my little brother might be alive today.
these thoughts and feelings are real. So recognizing them and supporting the individual that these thoughts and feelings are real are very important. I think for a family to be supportive towards individuals is the number one motivator for them to open up and talk about their feelings and get the help they need, because they do want to be supported. And as humans, we all want people to hear us and connect with us. And I think every person is looking towards that. So I think being supportive is very important. Your children or the adolescents in the family can open up and gain support from you and get the help they need.
I think there's definitely a stigma. There's definitely a fear of judgment. There's a fear of vulnerability, of actually admitting to ourselves or to others that I may be struggling with a mental health issue, because people may see that or hear that, maybe even those who are close to us, and feel that that's something that's embarrassing, or we don't want people to think, that we're quote unquote crazy, or that we can't handle ourselves. It's maybe a sign, we look at it as a sign of weakness, that to seek help for something like this means that I'm failing at something and I don't have the strength to overcome it on my own. But it's important for us to flip that and to recognize that, no, actually, strength is being able to be vulnerable. Strength is being able to seek that help. It's being able to be real with ourselves and recognize that it's okay to not be okay all the time, right? It's okay to need help. It's okay to reach out to get that help. So I think that's a lot of times the struggles that people, even older people, I remember, sitting with someone just recently, and they were telling me how, therapy benefited them so much, and how it's something that it's like an integral part of their life. And they see the struggles of their parents. There was a brother, and he sees the struggle of his parents, mental health struggles, these type of things. And he really wants them to experience what he's experienced through therapy and through counseling. But it's almost like, bringing up that idea is like sacrilegious.
Reducing mental health stigma is very important, as this has been a huge roadblock in obtaining the psychiatric services. The mental health stigma really limits us from looking at it in a perspective where we actually recognize this as an issue, because we are shy, we are shameful, we don't want to talk about it, we don't want to be labeled. And yes, there is the human nature is such that they don't want to believe they have a problem. They want to feel they're fine, which is understandable. But there comes a point in life when things are going downhill and there are things that need to be addressed. So I think removing mental health stigma would be the first step towards moving forward and making sure our youth and our adults and even our children and adolescents are safe and they can talk safely about their issues without feeling that they are ashamed about it, or they feel, others are going to look down upon them or be labeled or belittled. So we want to take away all these negative feelings and talk about their issues openly and get the help they need. And so I strongly believe that the stigma should be removed, especially in our Muslim community, where much of this is needed at this point in our lives. And we see so much happening around us in the form of suicide and homicide and various other serious situations that we're seeing in people's lives.
Mental health services are really just helping you through life. We all hit difficult moments in our life, different challenges. So going to see a therapist, it could just be a confidential place for all of us to see somebody. If you wait too long to get intervention, the problem could be much worse than it had been in the beginning if you just addressed the problem early on. You know what, and we got to be careful that we don't criticize the Muslim cultures that we come from, because that's any immigrant culture. It doesn't matter whether you're Mexican, Polish, Arab, Indian, it doesn't matter. All of those cultures see mental health as this kind of like unnecessary thing. And partly it's because, I always say this, that in the old world, wherever it is, any of those countries that I mentioned, a lot of times it was the clergy, the religious clergy that provided mental health services to the community. People didn't have shame going to see the priest or the imam to talk about a struggle in their family. And it wasn't always severe mental health. It could have been a challenge in their marriage or challenge with their child. And we're transitioning out of that now, especially in the West, where we're seeing how specialized, trained individuals in those areas can actually do a better job than the clergy can because they're not specially trained in those things. They can help, of course, but there's also a limit there. And I think most of the clergy, most of the imams in our community in Chicago have learned that, and they do a good job of seeing people short term and then realizing, okay, you need to go see a mental health professional now because it's beyond my reach.
As an imam or as a teacher, I can maybe help someone understand something from an Islamic perspective, give some maybe like crisis, spiritual counseling, but I'm not going to be there diagnosing someone. I'm not going to be there treating someone in a professional capacity for mental illness and these type of things. And that's how it should be. Like, that's not my position. That's not my role, but to be able to know and have confidence in the fact that I can refer someone to a Muslim mental health professional, someone that I know has that professional background and that can help this person. And that's something I do all the time.
And I think as parents, we have to be careful that that we allow the kids to to come of age, come into their own and build that self-confidence. I was very careful not to project my own fears and concerns onto my kids. It shouldn't be debilitating. So that's a very fine line we walk.
I think our doctors and physicians, our community recognize and see mental health issues on a regular basis. So they're encouraging people to seek help. So I find that because of the high level education in our community, this is the conversation that's being had in those circles. And so I don't, like I said, I don't think that we're that far behind. I would say 10 years ago, yes, maybe we were. But one of the things that one of the benefits of coronavirus and COVID-19 has been that because of the amount of people that are struggling with mental health now, it becomes almost like a norm. Everybody knows somebody who's had to seek mental health services during these last couple of years because of loneliness and isolation or anxiety or social phobias, these kind of things that have kind of really surfaced as we hopefully are climbing out of the pandemic right now.
Very possible that a person lives in this world as a believer with these struggles, and that those struggles, we hope, will be dealt with and will be overcome in this world. But even if a person experiences this and struggles through these throughout their lives, that there is always hope for a better tomorrow, if not in this world, then in the next. So finding comfort, rooting oneself in your relationship with Allah, with God, is one of the ways that those who are struggling with mental illness, mental health issues can find that comfort, to recognize that Allah, who He is, right? That He is more merciful than we are to ourselves. He is more wise than we can ever imagine. And so whatever He decrees for the believer is always in their best interest. And if He tests us with certain things, it's never to break us, but there's always a ultimate and tremendous wisdom in it. It's just maybe looking for that and finding that. And sometimes that is, it brings us to Him, and it helps us find healing, and it helps us find comforts and just this beautiful connection to Him.
Saving one life as if you have saved the whole mankind, and harming one life is as if you have harmed the entire mankind. So I take this very seriously, and I found that this has helped me move forward in my career, because each day I go out, I get inspired by saving people's lives in my little humble ways. Obviously, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is above all of us, and He's the one who can save each and every life. We can do just our part and do the contribution towards that betterment of humans. And each day I wake up and I feel strongly about this, that I remind myself that if I can help save someone's life today, it would be meaningful. And this gives me inspiration each day.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم فإن مع العسر يسرا إن مع العسر يسرا
SubhanAllah, I'm still processing that myself. That's actually the first time I've seen the entire thing, like the final draft. So, wow. Alhamdulillah. I hope everyone found it equally powerful. I firstly, want to thank the Halim family. I mean, they're not here, of course, but it's been an honor, a pleasure to be able to share their story with everyone. I can't even really imagine how much courage it takes to reach that point in your grief where you've reached acceptance and you're able to share your story for the sake of the betterment of society, right? May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant them ease and grant Arman maghfirah, and may Allah reward all of our interviewees. They, we're so grateful for the fact that they gave us their time and their contribution to the cause. They've been amazing, alhamdulillah. And now I'd like to actually turn this over to the director of our film, Manal, who is going to say a few words about her experience. So Manal, it's all yours.
Assalamualaikum, everyone. So I started this film with Project Taqwa, and my purpose was to basically convey the mission of Project Taqwa, which is to reduce the stigma of seeking help for your mental health issues. So I wanted to do that by using a personal narrative. I also knew I wanted to find 2 mental health professionals, 2 Islamic scholars like imams, sheikhs, and then like 1 to 2 personal stories to have variety and show that it's not just mental health professionals that think it's important to seek mental health help, but Islamic scholars themselves, to really show that it's important that we need to reduce the stigma. So we had Dr. Asmat Jaffrey, a psychiatrist, speak. We had Edmund Arroyo, social worker. And then we had Sheikh Umar speak as well and give the Islamic perspective. And then for the personal story, we had Sister Tabassum Halim. And I think that I couldn't have found a better person to really convey this message. I think her story is super powerful, and I can't appreciate her enough for being so vulnerable and strong and telling me every detail of Arman's story. Actually, that interview was conducted in his room. He left it she left it exactly as it was when he passed, with all of his things on his bulletin board, all of his like notes from school, all of these like he had like they had a scrapbook full of like notes from his friends saying like all the amazing things that Arman had done for him. And she went ahead and she showed me all of his things, even his medical certificate, because he was just about to graduate med school. Yeah, I also really, another reason why I find Arman's story in particular to be extremely powerful is because Arman is what like I feel we would consider the golden child standard of the Brown community, right? I mean, he was very athletic, very good looking, he was a doctor, about to be a doctor, very well known, wealthy, and yet he was struggling with this atypical depression. And the only reason why he didn't seek help is because of that taboo of not being perfect and maintaining that reputation, because what will they think, you know? And so I find that one line in the interview to be extremely powerful, where the Basamanti said, her eldest son said, had it not been for the stigma in our community, maybe my brother would still be alive today. So yeah, I just want to thank the president of Project Ekwa, Bilal, for giving me the opportunity to make this film. He's over there. As well as our editor, Elzian, for putting this all together. He's over there. And I'm just going to turn it back over to our Vice President, Saima, for some last remarks.
Can you guys hear me without the mic? Yeah. Oh, do I have to use it? Okay. That's my. I feel like I need to use both my hands while I'm talking. Oh, should I? Does that work? Does that work? Yeah? Okay. All right. Thank you for your patience. Okay, so now that we've watched the documentary and Manal shared with us her experience while filming the documentary and her vision, and I hope her vision has come to life, and we're able to make the impact that we intended to. I kind of wanted to go into how this documentary ties into everything we're all trying to do here. The theme of this conference, honoring legacies, reflecting over progress, envisioning new horizons, right? First of all, I absolutely love the theme of this conference this year. And I think, our documentary, of course, showcased exactly what that would look like. But to put that together and to be able to develop action items for each of us today, I think would be essential, right? So when we're addressing stigma, we've heard this term stigma so many times today, yesterday, and with the work that we all do or are interested in, stigma is something that comes up a lot. But these questions like why does it exist? Where did it come from? How do we overcome it? I don't have the answer to those questions, but what I absolutely do know is that this stigma is playing the role of a huge obstacle between struggle and seeking help. It's not even like a bridge. It's literally like, it's a very big gap, right? And what we're trying to do is figure out how we can make this obstacle something that's actually, that promotes getting help, that encourages people to seek help, right? this idea of the mental health crisis, I feel like I've heard a lot about it. As someone in the field, it seems like we've developed this mental health crisis has developed in the past couple of years due to the pandemic, which is true. But I would argue that the crisis that has been there for a very, very long time. And the pandemic gave us an opportunity to talk more about it, right? Social isolation, the opportunity to face conflicts and issues, the physical illness aspect of it, and then of course the environmental stressors. Those things, like Sheikh Umar was also saying, or sorry, Brother Edmund was also saying that, with the pandemic, we were able to see it. People started talking about it. There's social media, all that stuff is going on. But the mental health crisis has been there from way, way before that, right? And now it's like, okay, why does it exist? Why is it there? As mental health professionals, as community members, as advocates, as empaths, we want to reduce the stigma because there's a very negative connotation to this term when there isn't a negative connotation to any of the other things that create who we are as a human being, right? There's physical health, there's emotional health, there's spiritual health, there's social health. And that's what makes us who we are as a whole person. But we're going to choose, or the society is going to choose over time, intentionally or unintentionally, to seek to see the mental health aspect of it as something that's negative. And I do believe it has a negative connotation because mental health is associated to this emotion called sadness. Sadness equates to vulnerability. Vulnerability equates to weakness. And weakness is something many do not want to show, myself included at times, right? But something we fail to acknowledge is that sadness is just a human emotion, an emotion that was felt by the strongest leaders of prophetic times, of our very own, Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. He felt it, I'm sure many, many times, but specifically in that year of sorrow that Sheikh Umar talks about, where he, lost his uncle, where he lost his wife. He cried, he grieved for days, for I'm sure longer than that as well. He felt all of that. So how can we be exempt from it if he experienced it, just like how many of us do today? Another aspect of continuing someone's legacy, right, is, how do we do that? How do we really do that? There is this concept of moving on from something. But Rasulullah SAW did not move on from these people that he lost. He moved forward with them. He continued to keep them in his heart. He continued to talk about them. He continued to embody the characteristics, the teachings, the support, the ideologies that he learned from them. And that's his way of continuing their legacy. And we hear Sisters of Assam talk about Armand's legacy and how the way they want to honor it is by, as Manal was saying, breaking the stigma in Muslim mental health, or in the community, because that is what is the biggest barrier. When we talk about honoring a legacy, it's almost like, okay, now we want to do this, so how do we do it, right? What does that look like for us to honor a legacy, honor the Prophet's legacy? So it's about embodying his characteristics. So I believe, right? Like, we have all of these teachings. What do we do with it? As there was this thing I learned when I was in Sunday school, and my teacher would tell us that as Muslims, we are the messengers of the messenger. So like that is what we are here to do. Our duty is to continue that message. And we continue it by embodying the characteristics, those characteristics of kindness, of empathy, compassion, resilience. And those are the ones that stand out to me. Of course, I would like for each person here to reflect over what characteristics stand out to you. What are things that you can apply to your life, to your character that will be a way that you continue his legacy? The mind, body, soul, this whole aspect of the mind, body, soul is, you know, we all have it. We all have it. We're incomplete without our mind, our body, and our soul. It's a gift. It's an amana. So we have a responsibility to take care of it, right? And these are all, this is a very like positive way of looking at this entire concept of mental health, right? Like there's that whole negative connotation, the stigma aspect of it, but then there's this very like positive and encouraging aspect, like this is a responsibility, this is what we have to do, and this is what we're also going to be rewarded for it, right? To be able to take care of ourselves, to be able to take care of what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us. And then if it is in the form of a trial or tribulation, then with hardship comes ease, right? There is this term of validation, right? This term validation plays a really big role in talk therapy. You know, we start talk therapy with validation, we end talk therapy with validation. To feel heard, to be given the space to process thoughts, emotions. It's, you know, currently we're working with a population that struggles to regulate their emotions, to reframe their thoughts, to be self-compassionate, all due to the idea that mental health struggles are a societal influence rather than a human experience. Brother Edmund does talk about how like by the age of 35, everyone will have experienced some sort of grief, sadness, and that's just normalizing it, right? Like him saying that, like what is the purpose of that? Like he's normalizing, he's saying like this is going to happen. You will feel anxious at some point. You will feel sad at some point. Does that mean you're doing something wrong? Am I being any less of a believer because I'm having an episode of being sad? Am I any less of a believer because I'm having, you know, these anxiety symptoms, whatever? No, not necessarily, right? As the Ummah of Rasulullah, we forget that the prophetic times validated mental health struggle. They validated. It was there then, it is here now. Should be able to relate to their struggles rather than that was a different time, this is a different time. There's no denying there, but there's plenty of similarities as well, whether it's the teachings, whether it's the way we process certain emotions, whether it's our values, whether it's our beliefs. So now I kind of want to get into the reflecting over progress, right? Present day interventions, like what are we looking at? What is present day mental health, psychology, what does that all look like? So I solely want to talk about two evidence-based theories that I primarily use when I'm doing therapy is dialectical behavioral therapy and cognitive behavioral therapy. So in dialectical behavioral therapy, as you can see, it focuses a lot on acceptance and change. There's these concepts of mindfulness, meditation, emotion regulation, radical acceptance. There's some key interventions within the theory. Mindfulness. Now, the definition that you see up there of mindfulness is intentionally living with awareness in the moment. So in that moment, you can be feeling multiple things, and that is very, very normal and very, very okay. The ayah that this documentary is based on, with hardship comes ease, if you look at the dialect of that ayah, it's with hardship comes ease, not after hardship comes ease. We're not being told that after we experience something difficult, then he's going to give us something that's going to relieve our struggle. He's saying that both of those things are going to coexist, our hardship and our ease. Similarly, if we heard Sister Tabassam's story, right? She sounded so optimistic, and it's almost like, how did she sound so optimistic? I'm sure there's sadness there. There's been sadness there. But does that take away from the fact that perhaps there's gratitude there? Right? That sadness and gratitude can also coexist in many scenarios of our lives. I'm sure we can all relate to. But a lot of times we tend to feel guilty for feeling sad when we should be grateful. But that's not how it doesn't have to be that way. And that's really what mindfulness is all about. And it's like such a tweak, honestly, when I think about how like mindfulness is this Western concept that is evidence-based theory, and like everyone preaches it, like I preach it myself. But when we look at the Quran, when we look at these teachings, and it's been there for all these times, right? It's like we're honoring the legacy without even knowing we're honoring the legacy. SubhanAllah, which is great. I hope we all be rewarded for it. And then meditation, of course. There's, in Islam, we have our own forms of meditation. There's ibadah, there's worship, there's praying, there's reading Quran, there is doing dhikr, there's all of these things. But then, there's also deep breathing exercises. There's progressive muscle relaxation. So these concepts have been there for many, many times, or for a very, very long time, many times. And then radical acceptance is actually something I want to spend like a little bit of time on. And radical acceptance is really, as it sounds, it's really about being able to reach a point where you can say, I don't have to be okay with what's happening. I'm just accepting what's happening. It is what it is. Because you cannot move on from something until you've accepted it. And we see in the documentary, as Sister Tabassum is talking, you know she's reached acceptance in her grief. That's why she's able to talk about it so confidently, mashallah. And even in radical acceptance, it's like we're also taught to, no matter what happens, no matter what the outcome may be, it is our duty to accept Allah's decree. And that is what radical acceptance is all about. So those are some key interventions in DBT that I wanted to cover, because I think they do relate a lot to a lot of our Islamic teachings that we are continuing. Now, when it comes to another present day initiative or intervention, CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, has a lot to do with our thoughts. I guess a fancier way of talking about thinking is contemplation. I was at, share a short story. My last Umrah, we were doing ziyarah, and the ziyarah tour guide was talking about how Rasulullah SAW used to go up to the cave, and he used to spend hours there, and he would meditate. And of course, the therapist in me is like, oh, what did he do for meditation? And I remember my cousin was in the car, and he was like, yes, she's a therapist. That's what she's asking. And he was like, he would contemplate. He would sit there and he would think. Now there's also this negative connotation with thinking, overthinking, which, of course, can be limited, and I'm sure it takes us down a rabbit hole too, but it doesn't all have to be negative. Contemplation is good for you. You should reflect over your life. You should reflect over your purpose here, today, in this moment. Hope y'all are doing it right now. But yeah, that's what I think about when I think of like our cognitive abilities is a part of our mind, right? Our mental health, something we've been gifted, something that's been scripted and instilled into us by our Lord. And then now we have this idea of core beliefs, right? Core beliefs, like, okay, let's do a little, like, we're doing a little squiggly here. So we have like an action. That action comes from a feeling. That feeling comes from a thought. That thought is coming from an incident that happened. The way you're perceiving that incident is from a lens that has been influenced by your core belief. So that's the whole idea there, right? With a core belief. In order for you to be able to change your action, you take all of those steps back and you reframe the core belief. And then you change that lens. That lens changes the way you perceive the situation, then the thought, then the feeling, then the action. Similarly, we've been told for years and years that in order for you to be able to change your habits, you have to start from within. It all starts from within. Why am I doing this? If it's a bad habit or good habit, where's it coming from? It's coming from something, a belief that I have, a negative self-belief or a positive one. It's all coming from somewhere and being influenced by something. So that right there is kind of like the two sides, right? Something we are doing in present day society, in psychology, in Western psychology, and worldly psychology, like everywhere. These are the things that we're preaching. But all of these things go way back. And that makes me feel extremely honored to be, Muslim. The fact that, we play a big part in a lot of these teachings, whether, people see it or not. And now I'd like to go into, again, reflecting over progress, present day initiatives. This right here, being here, is a present day initiative. This is how far we have come. Although it may seem like the beginning, although it may seem like we've got a long way to go, we still made it this far. And that means a lot. That means a lot to so many people out there. Every single person each of you has impacted. And I'm sure you have. I'm sure you have. And that is just the beginning. There's much, much more to do. It's been started and it's going to happen. What we have going on nowadays, like if you look at just even with Project Taqwa, it's an advocacy organization. It's something that we're trying to do. We're working with masajids, we're working with local organizations, collaborating with different initiatives to be able to have a presence in the community, to be able to spread the message, to be able to open that dialogue, have open dialogue, to be able to talk about it freely without it being a them problem and not an us problem. That is what the present day initiative is. And then of course, I know there's a mental health aid training going on for imams here, which is great. That is a great initiative. It's something that I think a lot of communities around the country are doing as well. So that is something that's progress. That is good. So we're headed in a good direction, inshallah. And something I think, I definitely want to quote Sheikh Omar here. He talks about how, and I love what he said, that there's a limitation there, right? He talks about how scholars and community members may be limited in their knowledge when it comes to mental health, right? And that's when they turn to the professionals. When they invite mental health professionals into the masjids to be able to talk, that opens up the door right there. Because people want to see their leaders doing this. And I really appreciate Sheikh Omar for talking about that and showing that that is something that is happening, that is something that they believe in. And now, the big question, how? How can we work together to break the stigma in our community? The purpose of this documentary, the purpose behind the awareness, it's creating this documentary, trying to impact lives, trying to impact communities, is also to reflect over our inner biases. I'm sure every person while watching this, myself included, was their mind was working as you're watching it. You're reflecting, you're thinking about how you're feeling about, like, whether it's the visuals, whether it's the content of the speakers, you're reflecting. And certain things are coming up, maybe certain uncomfortable things are coming up for you. Maybe certain things are coming up, like certain stereotypes you may have. So that actionable item that I want to leave each of you with today, before we get into the Q&A, is reflect over your inner biases, reflect over this, maybe the stereotypes you have about certain things, because self-awareness is the first step. We cannot reduce the stigma or break the stigma until we know who we are and where we stand on all of these issues. We don't have to be so outcome oriented, like this person did this, so this is going to be the outcome. This is what's going to happen. The fact of the matter is somebody is struggling and we have to be kind. Somebody is struggling, we have to be compassionate. No matter what the spectrum of hardship is, no matter where they are on that spectrum, they are struggling, and we have a duty to treat them with kindness, compassion, and what else is positive? Kindness, compassion, and give them the support that they need, that they deserve, right? Unconditionally. And that's where it begins, right? We're honoring our Prophet Prophet's legacy by embodying his characteristics of kindness, of compassion, of empathy, of resilience in our hard times. When we honor that legacy, that's how we are breaking the stigma. And that is where it begins. You know, in order to change the narrative in society, we have to begin with changing the narrative up here. It's a very individualistic journey. So yeah, that's my little bit on the documentary. Thank you for listening. Thank you for listening, everyone. I do want to open up the floor for any questions about our film, any questions for Manal during the filming process, or any comments that you'd like to give. Yes. Yes. Yeah.
I just wanted to pick up on something, Manal, you said, because I think it goes beyond stigma of health seeking, and it requires critical awareness of productivity and the idea of success, finance and status. Because a big part of the way that cultural settlement and settlement trauma manifests itself is this idea that there's a whole destination. And I think that that's actually what's getting worse over time in American society with the hyper competition, the status, the idea of tier 1, tier 2 activities. That actually takes stigma and magnifies it by 1,000. So I appreciate your call for us to reflect, but I think we also need to critically reflect on success. And I have to say, as someone who works in the field, I'm having to reckon this with teenagers at home, where I'm reenacting that same toxic cycle unless my wife and I are willing to break it. And that means accepting that the best thing for my child to come out of high school with is the ability to cope with disappointment, self-confidence, and a sense of peace about who they are and where their strengths lie. Because the system isn't going to do that. The system's designed to perpetuate the same kind of toxic perfectionism. So thanks for the opportunity.
Assalamu alaikum. Again, thank you for the presentation in the film. So how is this film being packaged as a tool or a resource or prompt for communities or centers to use? And is there an accompanying curriculum or prompts of questions and things that people could use in that community discussion or your place of gathering? And how can they access that also?
Sorry, I also want to respond to his as well real quickly. Yeah, I do appreciate that comment. I also remember in the documentary Edmund saying it's not just like the brown community, it's the Latino community, it's this community, it's very much immigrant culture, right? To like a lot of first generation Americans, we feel this pressure because our parents came here for like us to be successful. So yeah, definitely that pressure of success. and when I interviewed at the Basmati as well, she kept on reinforcing that Arman had very high goals. His whole personality was he had high goals, and he just would work and work and work and work until he achieved them, almost to like it was debilitating how much of a perfectionist and hard worker he was. But it's a very true comment. As far as curriculum and that goes, this so we are from a nonprofit called Project Taqwa, and what we do is we have like educational seminars and workshops spreading awareness of mental health. Like we had a workshop about addiction and seeing mental health issues from an Islamic perspective. So we like to have usually a mental health professional as a speaker, as well as like an Islamic scholar speaking as well with them. And we have discussions like these as well. And we do also have a website. At the end of the documentary, we had a QR code, but it might be in the handouts as well, where we have like a list of resources where you can seek that help. So.
Any other questions or comments? Okay. Oh.
Assalamu alaikum. My question is in regards to the Halim family. So we're from Canada, and a similar story resonates with us because we've had also a Canadian family that lost their son to mental illness, and they share their story as well. So now I'm hearing a story across the border and thinking about Muslim families who lost their children to mental illness. Do you know if the family is in some sort of group support with other families, and maybe that's something that we can make happen so that other families who maybe have put the loss of their children under the rugs, not bringing up that conversation, we can start now reaching out to them and giving them that family support. So it's just an idea, but also maybe if you can add on, if you know of any work like that that's going on.
I'll just briefly respond to your first question of if the family, I don't know actually, if they're in any sort of group therapy. I do know the mom did mention she went to therapy, and she went to a scholar as well, because she's just like, obviously as a mother, like your child is a piece of you, and she needed that piece of like what the scholar would say to what happened to him. But our vice president and clinical psychologist Saima can answer the group therapy.
I think that's a great idea. I think that would be a great initiative. I actually don't know of any programs specifically for like Muslim families that have lost loved ones to suicide. If I don't know of such programs, at least in the Chicagoland area, but I do think that's a great initiative, and the fact that you're able to relate to this story, and I think that again, that is the first step, right? To be able to make that impact is to be able to resonate, to be able to find that this is a missing piece of the puzzle. So like, how can we make this happen? Right. So I absolutely think that's something that I'm sure we can discuss and consider, inshallah. Yes.
Assalamu alaikum. So this came up in the addiction lecture earlier, but can you comment on when something like this happens and it's not labeled like a suicide or an addiction, it's not labeled as this person died due to drug overdose. And is that, within a broader stigma, and how, should we call things what they are, and just generally commentary on that would be helpful.
It's a great question. So when it comes to, what we should label things as. I think there is, a few things to consider, right? There's different terminologies that are okay. There are some that are not okay. You may have seen in the documentary that the term suicide was not mentioned at all, right? But we all knew what was going on. So, is that wrong? Is it wrong that the term wasn't mentioned? I don't think so. I think it's something that, that is the family's choice. That is it could be, it's not necessary for the term to be there. However, is it wrong to use the word? I wouldn't say so. I think if we're speaking technically from what I know, I think we are trying to steer away from saying a person committed suicide. That is something we're trying to steer away from. It's more died by suicide or completed or have ended their life. Those are more acceptable or accepted terminal when it comes to terminology. That is what we are looking at technically. So yeah, and then you mentioned the addiction piece. I think it goes the same for that as well. Right. And also I think it depends on the type of narrative that we're trying to give. I think for the cause, if that's something that's necessary to be able to say it how it is, then so be it. But in a different setting, maybe to have it be something that's assumed or something that you kind of already know and you're able to kind of look at it in more of a warmer way, then that's also okay. Yeah.
Yeah, and just to add on to that real quick, I was responsible for editing the documentary. So I watched through all of Tabassum's interview and things like that, all of her little anecdotes about Arman. And what she emphasized the most out of anything else was instead of treating it as someone who had taken their life, was that he was more of a victim of a almost like a disease or an illness. And that was really what they had felt for his case. And of course, like you said, like it's different depending on the cases and things like that. But they really felt like that, especially with Arman, given that his very high standards for himself and things like that, that it was really more so the way that he had kind of lived out his life, the work ethic that was so debilitating, like Manal had mentioned, that he had in his life. It was more so a disease that kind of took away from him over a long period of time until it became something that was fatal, rather than just being like an event that just kind of just happened. It was rather something that was over time until, like I said, it became something that was terminal. So yeah, thank you.
Do you have a question?
Oh, I'm sorry. I was just.
Going forward, you mentioned that you actually were looking for 2 scholars, 2 mental health professionals, and maybe 2 speakers, and so Tabassum was spoken. So I didn't know if there was there a challenge to identify, again, this is a very personal, private matter for families and the grief and the pain, and for us to expect someone to find courage, then to turn around, to then become an advocate to help the community develop resilience to face these issues. And I don't want to assume, I'm not sure people who even know who Tabassum is. I mean, in her role as a national level Muslim leader and her role in CIOCG and so forth, it would make sense. But I just want to assume just because she's this resilient community leader, that she can then also see beyond and say, like, how do I take this grief and pain and help someone not potentially suffer from it? But in that, was there a challenge? And then how do we think about capturing stories? Doing it on video, I just can imagine it's just like a whole nother level, a certain level, because as soon as I start, I'm like, oh my God, that's Tabassum, right? I didn't even know she had her lost her son, right? But then how there's other ways for a little bit more of anonymity in how people can share, maybe through print and so forth. Is the collective thinking about maybe presenting those type of modalities or ways of collecting stories for people to learn from and gain awareness and so forth on this issue? That's why I'm just kind of, well, is there challenges to find others, and then what are the other ways to how to capture that where people can keep some more level of anonymity in what they're experiencing?
Yeah, that's super cool that you know who she is. She is like a speaker of this sort of issue, and like you said, she's with CICG. I think obviously because this is a super difficult topic, it would normally be hard to find someone. Fortunately, she's a really good friend of my mom. So I just asked my mom, like, do you know anyone? And she asked the Tabassum auntie, and the Tabassum auntie was very willing to share this story. So yeah. Okay. I think Saima can answer this one.
So the reason behind that is actually that the term commit is used for committing a crime. Yeah, so that's why it's something that's we're trying to steer away from as a community. It's a good question. Oh, apparently we're out of time, but I can take your question up here if you want it, or like afterwards. Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you. Jazakallah khair. Thank you.
Thank you all for joining today's conversation. Thank you, Saima and Manal. We will be back. We'll be taking a 15-minute break, then we'll be back for our next session at around 3:45. Thank you.